Beep, 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 beep. All that's new and approved from the Jester's News House. Hello, people. Second video in one day. I am spoiling thee. This is an update, but predominantly I'm going to do analysis of Keir Starmer's performance on LBC. Oh, God. It's bad. Right, okay, so be ready for it. But before that, there's a few pieces of news. OurDuty, which is a fantastic group working with parents, been there from the start, really, getting on with it, as you say, have put out their response to the NHS consultation reference, the new clinics. I'm concerned about some of the groups that are responding who don't seem to quite get what I tried to say. And maybe we're just in a different place, which is fine. I just wish that they'd look a little bit more closely and consider some of the problems I've mentioned that are ontological and linguistic, so i.e. about knowledge and language. OurDuty, on the other hand, get it completely. So OurDuty has put out what I would call a preliminary tester to get people to have a look at. Now, I will put a link to that in the doobries, as usual, in the description. Do the usual, join my Patreon. Just become a warrior teacher. I sent out 30 emails today to people that want to become warrior teachers. I expect to get 3 or 4 out of that. It'd be great, you know? And I'm trying to set up one in Australia. So if you're Australian and you're watching this, come and be a warrior teacher, because then I can do one specifically for that time period. But I need enough people to be able to do it. 12 is what we need to get this next cohort off the ground. Anyway, that's sort of, you know, interesting stuff. I've got a meeting tomorrow as well, okay, about the Warrior Teacher program. If you'd like to come to the meeting, it's a Teams meeting that will be held online at 8 p.m. tomorrow evening for those that wish to become Warrior Teachers who have questions they'd like to ask me. I'm going to limit the room to about 20 people, I think. So as soon as we get to 20, there'll be no more entry. But if you are interested, please DM me or go to the Warrior Teacher website, which is in the doobries downstairs. Drop me an email in the next 3 hours and I'll add you to the list. Okay? That's where we're at, right? So let's get straight on to the meat and potatoes and talk about Keir Starmer the Harmer, right? Keir Starmer, this is a man who's had a bloody good career. Yes, right? Okay. Lawyer, Crown Prosecution Service, he's had a good career, okay? So what's he doing? If you want to watch the interview, it's downstairs. You can see it in the doobries and go and watch it first if you wish to. But in essence, just to give you a breakdown, somebody from the rather marvellous Women's Rights Network. You know when you need that cuppa. It's one of those moments. The Women's Rights Network, okay, asked him the question, should Eddie Izzard be on women's shortlists? This was a masterclass in obfuscation that, believe it or not, relates to Penis Piano Man. Let's see before I get to the end if you can guess why it relates to Penis Piano Man. All right, okay? So, Mr. Starmer, should Eddie Izzard be allowed on all women's shortlists? His first words were, let's set this out as a matter of principle, which he then proceeded not to. He then said something about, I'm not going to go through all of it, just the bits that were, you know, sort of struck me as weird and funny and wrong, okay? Let's be clear, to 99.9% of women, biologically is a... No. 100%, Keir. The same as 100% of men. It's not complicated, dear boy. You just seem to be making it so. Right? Okay. He then waffled on about his absolute faith in the Equality Act and single-sex spaces for women, which, because he's done a lot of work on violence against women and girls, will mean that he thinks single-sex spaces are important, right? And he said we must be careful here, because if you talk to teenagers, and here's an important bit for you, right? They're unable to get the treatment they want. That was the word he used. They want. Not what they need, what they want. Okay? And medical treatment they want. Then went on further. I mean, has he read the NHS thing? Has he? Are we aware of what we're doing? Are we? You know? Does he know what's going on? Does he know what's been happening? I'm going to say no. What? Right? So, all that business, medical treatment, blah, 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 99% of women, blah, 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 blah. And then he said, but, right, so, you can ignore everything that came before the but. Forget it. None of it matters, right, okay? But a small percentage identify as a different gender than the one that they were born with. And off he goes, right? No idea. I'm going to have to assume that a man of his excellence has no idea what he's talking about. I have to. And then he talks about the GRA and how it needs to be modernised. We need to modernise the GRA. Right, okay. Right? They've no intention of giving this up. So Starmer, the teat farmer, right, okay, then goes on about medical, and then completely changes the subject to something that's absolutely immaterial about the fact that women's shortlists are complicated now because there's 50% of women and 50% of men. Jesus Christ. Women's shortlists, I'll say it and it's going to upset people, shouldn't exist. You don't need it, for God's sake. Look at what women have done in this maloo. You think you need shortlists? Half of that idea is what got us here in the first place. Remember that, okay? The only arena in which I think shortlists are really relevant is politics, okay? But there comes a time when you have to go, nope, that's it. Game on. So, then he said, when the lovely LBC chap said to him, but do you think that Eddie Izzard should be on women's shortlists? He then said, well, I'm not going to talk about individuals, despite the fact that a few minutes ago he'd said, consider teenagers. Talking about individuals. I'm not going to discuss this with you. It's not about individuals, blah, blah, blah. And then proceeded to say nothing whatsoever that was declarative of any interest whatsoever. And just went with the identitarian normality of nonsense. Once again, the LBC person reiterated, but Mr. Starmer, should Eddie Izzard be on a women's show? I'm not talking about that on here. I'm not talking about that on here. When are you going to talk about it, Keir? When do you give me a call? I'm not a busy bloke. I'm not like you. I'll do it around your time frame. So what connects him with Piano Man? With Penis Piano Man? I'll tell you what connects him with Penis Piano Man. Both of what you see, what LBC is, right? What he's doing on LBC, and both of what you see, and what you see on Friday Night Livid, when he gets his wobbly dangle out, are queer performativity. You don't want to hear it. You might not like it, but that's what it... But, said Starmer, and then promptly went on about gender identity and goodness knows what else. Cobblers, and then refused to talk about it. The only difference is that Keir Starmer the Harmer's dick is metaphorical. Whereas that twat on TV, it wasn't metaphorical, it was real. Still queer performativity. Horrible, isn't it? The Labour Party are done. They aren't the friend of women and they're not the friend of gay men. The connection between him and Penis Piano Man is that they are both practicing queer performativity. Anti-heteronormative. Done under the guise of a small percentage of the population that don't exist. That don't exist. He believes in gendered souls. Now, I'm either right about that, and he does believe all that, he knows exactly what he's doing, or he's just ill-informed. Right, I'm going with the second. He's a serious bloke. I'm going with the second. And I think he's just fell, like everybody else, for this cobblers. And I'm going with the second because it makes me feel better. And I hope it does you too. Because if it's the first, any woman who votes for Labour, any gay man who votes for Labour, is a turkey voting for Christmas. And as we've seen with these queer performers, there isn't necessarily that much to gobble. Goodbye.